Roll abilities have been rebalanced in Cyberpunk RED. And in Cyberpunk RED, they're the most costly thing to improve about your character. With good reason. They're powerful compared to other skills and define a significant amount of what your character can do. Not that you're confined to that for long, thankfully. So with that said, let's take a closer look at a few of them, shall we? The descriptions of the role abilities start on page 30, with more detailed explanations on page 144. They all have their own special rules and thus require more reading than a standard skill write-up. Even then, they're still pretty straightforward in most cases. Lists of things you can do and how it'll work depending on your rank in that role ability. Solo, you have some special abilities that you can use by swapping around a pool of points. Techs, you get some special I build things, points to pick new skills that you can only get through that role ability. Ditto for medtechs. And as a player, if you aren't using that role, and you're not even interested in using that role, guess what? You can pretty safely ignore them. With few exceptions, many of the role abilities can be referred to on a need-to-know basis. There are a few that I do think deserve some extra attention since they are more involved than others. I'm going to look at net running, since this is probably one of the first future-setting games that has a hacking system I actually like. Then vehicle combat, a very important thing to know about since the Nomad ability hinges on these rules. And night markets, one of the things fixers can get together and call upon, just because I think they're neat. Page 147 is where Interface, the Netrunner role ability, is described. It has a chart that shows how your rank determines how many net actions per turn you get. It also sums up various interface actions, but ultimately points you to page 198. First things first, you need a cyber deck to be able to access the net, with the quality of your deck determining how many programs you can load into it. You'll also need a pair of VR goggles so that you can see what's going on. Or, just install a VR module into both of your cyber eyes. It is important to remember this, though. Since most of the world's infrastructure has been destroyed by the corporate wars in Cyberpunk RED, a lot of things simply aren't connected to the net like they are in our modern world. To say nothing that lurks in the dangers of the internet. Meaning, if you want to hack something, you have to get physically close to it first. And the net architecture it's hooked up to will probably only let you control some things in that building. Thus, only the things that need to be remotely controlled are likely to be hooked up to a net architecture. Maybe a common file server for data everybody in the firm might need to work with. Or the controls for security cameras and doors in a storage facility. Mechanically, a net architecture has various levels, and each level has something on it. Think of it as some kind of dungeon elevator. And you can go through as many of these levels as you would like on your turn, assuming you don't wander into a floor with something that can stop your progress, like a password. Just keep in mind, it's more likely you'll encounter things to slow you down or stop you than you would things that you can actually use. Things like black ice, which, when lying in wait, act as equal part trap and monster for you to deal with. When you encounter a black ice program, you roll 1d10 plus interface and speed against the black ice's speed and 1d10. If you score lower than it, its effects immediately hit you, and then it goes to the top of the initiative queue, continually making its attack every turn until either you slide away from it or destroy it by using an attack program. So if you run too deep, too fast, you're going to have a lot of very angry programs hunting you down. You can also put these things on your own cyber deck, and either set them as a trap of your own if you think another netrunner is following you, or to get some extra help with fighting other programs. To that end, we're going to spend a moment talking about some of the important stats different programs have. All of them have a res rating. This is the equivalent of HP. If res is dropped to 0, it shuts off and loses any effects that it grants. Or if it's a black ice, it shuts down and is no longer a threat. Some programs have an attack rating, which is a bonus that they give to any rolls made while, well, attacking with them. This is also the bonus that Black Ice will use when attacking a target. They also have a defense rating, which is added to the defense roll that a Black Ice makes when it is attacked. Other than that, it's mostly a matter of reading the stat blocks to know what they do, and keeping in mind that Black Ice can destroy programs or even harm a netrunner directly by frying their brain. And the last, most sophisticated type of Black Ice is what they call the Demon. They don't attack netrunners directly, and they cannot deploy other Black Ice, but they exist primarily to operate control nodes for things that exist in meat space. And GMs, the most important thing is that there's a chart in this section for randomly determining things that would appear in a net architecture, just in case you've got a player that's particularly gung-ho about hacking and cracking. Come up with what level any important binguses and MacGuffins would be on, and just randomize everything else. For players, let's reiterate the process. Go out in the physical world, find a net architecture, jack in, and play a game of push your luck to see what you can snatch from it. Vehicle combat starts on page 189, and it's honestly kind of a short section that doesn't add too much to the mix. The important stats for vehicles are as follows. Structural damage points, which are the equivalent of HP for a vehicle. Combat speed, which is what its move stat would be, and how many spaces it could thus move in combat. And its narrative speed, what its top speed is when you put the pedal to the metal. When you start operating a vehicle, there's 3 important things you need to make note of. You are then placed at the top of the initiative roster. Your move speed is replaced with the vehicle's. The vehicle is carrying you, not your legs. And you can't run anymore, because you're driving. Worth noting is that if your character has interface plugs, one of the cyberware options for a Neuralink, you can plug into the car and drive it with your brain. Otherwise, you need to have at least one hand on the wheel at all times. Otherwise, you'll lose control of the vehicle, and the GM then decides where that vehicle goes next. GMs, pick something suitably destructive and hilarious. Driving normally is like any other action. If there's no risk involved, you don't really need to roll to succeed or otherwise maintain control of the vehicle. But if you're going to try something like hitting an improvised ramp to jump over an obstacle, that's when you'd have to roll to do this so safely, or not as dangerously. And if you fail the roll, you lose control of the vehicle, and the GM decides where your vehicle goes next. GMs, pick something suitably destructive and hilarious. If you don't have enough open hands to use your weapon of choice and you still need to take something out while you're driving, you always have the option of ramming into it. Which is not without risks since you are crashing, even if it is intentional. By normal rules, every character and object involved in the crash takes 6d6 damage and suffers the whiplash critical injury. The person driving, their passenger, the vehicle that was idling in traffic, and the person walking in front of them all take 6d6, and if applicable, they take whiplash. So if you just want to prove you're tougher than your quarry, that's an option at least. Though nomads might have some tricks available to them with their roll ability. When somebody in the Time of the Red gets a big haul of goodies, they're going to need to sell them. And night markets are the best place to offload a bunch of crap all at once, either to a bunch of ordinary dudes who really want it, or to somebody who thinks they can flip it later for a profit. Mechanically, it's just that, a place where players can offload hard-earned eddies more easily than they found them, and the rules for them start on page 338. As I hinted earlier, at rank 5, fixers are able to pull their resources together to set up a night market. And night markets include one of the things my longtime fans will know I absolutely love: charts and tables. It works a little bit like this if you want to randomly generate a night market. The first chart is what you're likely to find. Roll 2d6, and those are the kinds of goods most easily found in this particular market. Then you roll 1d10 for either one of the categories, and that's how many subcategories of that type will be available in that market. This is a lot of dice rolling, and if you've got no patience for it, you can do it all beforehand. But if you have some whimsy in your life, you can make a big show about this, letting everybody at the table roll a few times to see what you get with those subcategories. You can have more than one role, and you can change what your current role is. It's your most recently acquired role ability, however, that determines what your character is. It's what tables you use and how the world of Cyberpunk RED sees them. The specifics for changing are quite simple. You can't start the game with more than one role ability, and you can't change unless your current role ability is at least at 4, though you can still improve your previously held role abilities. But you will always be known by your latest acquired role ability. Worth noting, role abilities aren't just the perks that come with your place in society. They are literally your character's job. They are the way that they earn their kibble. And some role abilities will backfire if you abuse your position in that society. As a lawman, you can't call for backup at every little inconvenience. As an exec, you're expected to bring in revenue for the company. Even rocker boys have to put out decent music from time to time. And since I'm always a fan of random charts, I feel like I should also bring up the hustle tables. Let's say you don't know what you want your character to do for a given time frame, or as a GM, you need to fill some narrative dead air while some of the player characters have wounds that need to convalesce. A quick look on page 381 shows you different ways of making money in the Time of the Red, including the hustle charts. This is another place where your character's role comes in. It's their bread and butter way of making their way in the Time of the Red. When you decide you want your character to hustle, you roll on the chart for their role ability. The result is what your character spends a week doing, complete with a small stack of eddies to show for it. Maybe. If they're lucky. Combine that with the encounters in Night City on page 417, and you've got a recipe for improvising a session real quick. Roll for the hustle, pepper in some details for how that goes, add in a random encounter or two, and you've got at least a few story beats to play off of. Just keep in mind, for most roles when you're starting out, this is not enough to afford your cargo container home that you start off with, and probably not enough for food either. You're gonna need to find some big jobs or big scores to make the real money. On the subject of earning your keep, that brings me to the last little bit of advice for anybody running a game of Cyberpunk RED. I would venture to guess that big hauls are how supply chains are repairing themselves in the Time of the Red. An idea that brings us to a very easy sort of conflict to build up in a game of Cyberpunk. It is the struggle as old as time. There is a thing that somebody wants and they're having trouble getting it. That thing here could be the location of some goodies, either as a scoop on where to find them, or actually getting out to it and collecting them, or figuring out how to move the goodies, or knowing somebody who is moving the goodies and trying to snag them for yourself. And just because you got them into the city doesn't mean that they're safe, because now you gotta find a way to liquidate those assets by moving them to a night market, hosting one, or selling the goodies off to somebody who can make it to a night market. And keep in mind, every day you're holding on to that big payload is a day somebody can find out about it and try to take advantage of that situation for themselves. Which means, when in doubt for coming up with a gig, pick some part of that slapdash supply chain, and that's the drama du jour. Thanks for watching. If you found this helpful or useful, give me a thumbs up like. And if you want to know more about Cyberpunk or other tabletop role-playing games, consider checking out my other videos, or subscribing. With all that said, always take it to the edge, chooms.